So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending. I know we still have a few more folks getting on, but I want to respect everybody's time. So thank you so much for attending today's webinar on the power of investing to change the world. We're very blessed to have Jason Myhre with Eventide, who's a managing partner there, to teach us of how important God believes of how you invest your dollars and what investing in kingdom-minded companies actually looks like. So I'm going to open this up in prayer. So Father God, Lord, I thank you for this opportunity, Lord, to be able to share opportunities for those in the marketplace, Father God, Lord, that you really do care of how people invest their money. And Lord, that this is potentially a new idea for folks that are on this call about biblical responsible investing, Lord. And I just pray blessing and thank you for Jason and his time today with Eventide to be able to just teach about a new way of investing, Lord. And we just thank you, pray blessings for everyone on this call. And Lord, we also pray for peace over our nation and our land, Lord. And we just thank you so much. We love you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Jason Myhre with Eventide. Jason, take it away.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Michael. And I just want to say a warm hello to all of you that are joining in on today's call for a topic that I love. I think this is such an amazing talk. I think you're going to really enjoy it. So before we jump into the topic, I'll just give you my self-introduction. Always good to know who you're listening to. So I'm Jason. Good to meet you. I'm a managing partner of a company called Eventide. We are a Boston-based mutual fund company that specializes in faith-based and values-based investing. My day-to-day work is in an area that we call advocacy, where I speak to audiences about the importance of their values whenever they're making investment decisions. All right, so with that, we'll formally begin. So how do we change the world? Big topic here. And I wish that we were all in a room together so I could hear your thoughts on how you believe the culture changes. Since we can't do that, I'm going to just provide a few of my own thoughts here that I'm going to be building off of someone else. So in order to address this, we have to really start by first kind of sweeping away a few common misconceptions. And this first one is a really controversial one to say after the recent couple of weeks, but the world does not fundamentally change through politics. So politicians, they kind of have their fingers up in the wind and they're trying to read which way the winds are blowing. And they operate more or less according to that paradigm. So they operate as a servant to the will of the people and the winds of society. And it's really that politicians are kind of downstream of some of these cultural change ideas, and they're there to implement them. So we can talk more about this if you want. Second, the world does not fundamentally change through autonomous individuals. History remembers great individuals, William Wilberforce, Nelson Mandela, etc. But if you actually read the history around those individuals closely, you'll see that there are many other forces at play. So what I've just laid out for you is, these are not my own thoughts. This is a case that's been made, I think, very convincingly by James Davison Hunter. He is a Christian sociologist at the University of Virginia, and he records these thoughts in an excellent book, which I recommend, entitled To Change the World. So how does the world change? Well, let me read you a quote from his book. This capacity to change the world is not evenly distributed in a society, but is concentrated in certain institutions. That's going to be the key, certain institutions, and among certain leadership groups who have a lopsided access to the means of cultural production. And what I'm going to try to convince you of in this presentation is that investing is one of these certain institutions with disproportionate power to change the world. And as we will see, capital and the movement of capital all throughout history has profoundly shaped the world as we know it today. For my first example, I'm going to start out with talking about this person. And by the way, I have a few polls for you that I will put up on your screen throughout the presentation to keep us all involved here. So go back to your middle school history days. And who is this person that's on the screen? Great, you guys are taking to this. Don't be shy. One of the most famous voyages of all time. Awesome. I'll leave this open for a second. So I gave you a list of all famous explorers here. So if you get it wrong, you don't have to feel too bad. All right, I'm going to go ahead and call this poll done and share the results. Okay, so 60% of you got it right. It's Christopher Columbus. And as I said, don't feel bad if you guessed one of the others. It's a tough question. Okay, stop the share. So everyone should feel like they know the story of Christopher Columbus, right? He sailed the ocean blue in 1492. But what many of us don't know is the investing story behind this journey. So sailing on the Atlantic in those days was an incredibly expensive proposition. No one had done it, and it required a lot of capital to back this venture. And no one person had the capital to finance such an expedition. So Columbus actually had to traipse all over Europe to try to drum up investor support for this journey. He began in his home country of Italy. He was from Genoa, Italy. They said, no way. Next, he goes to Portugal, which was the world leader in these kind of shipping expeditions. They said, no. He goes to France. He goes to England. No, sir. He finally receives his yes in Spain. And many of us remember the story of Ferdinand and Isabella. By the way, he struck a very sophisticated deal with his investors. He negotiated the rights to receive 10% revenues from this trading route that he would establish, and an option to invest up to 1/8 in any commercial business that was established in lands that he would claim on behalf of Spain. Pretty interesting. So make no mistake about it, this was definitely a for-profit business and an investor-led effort. Now let's talk about the world change, because many of us remember how the rest of the story goes here, but I want you to think about world change through a series of questions. Why does Central America and on down, why do they speak Spanish? Why is the major religion of that whole territory Roman Catholic? Why do they eat tortillas and not croissants? The answer to these questions is investors, because Spain backed Columbus. He sailed under the Spanish flag and carried Spanish interests with him in the new territory. And this determined the language, the religion, and the culture of that region. And what I want you to consider is that it could have gone a different way, right? I told you he stopped in all these places around Europe. He stopped in England. Let's imagine England had decided to back Columbus. Well, as strange as it is for us to think about, the language of Central and South America would be English. The religion would be Anglican after the Church of England, and the culture would look like British society. It's kind of odd to think about, but it was investors who decided this world impact, impacts they probably weren't thinking about when they originally financed this expedition. Let me give you another example. This is a map of the trading routes of the British India Company, shown in the rose color, and the Dutch East India Company, shown in the mustard color, established in the year 1600 and 1602, respectively. Modern economic historians will tell you that the world of corporations was born out of these shipping routes in the 1600s, and that these two are the first truly modern corporations as we think about them today. Very expensive, just like Columbus. No one person had the capital to finance it, so they had to raise capital. They did so by issuing stocks and bonds. It was the first time that was done. So they issued stocks and bonds to ordinary investors. And in fact, we get the establishment of the world's first stock exchange in Amsterdam, where people could now trade these stocks and bonds with other investors in order to gain liquidity. Now, what's the world change here? Well, in the case of the British India Company, India actually becomes a colony of Britain as a result of this one company. This is why, to this day, although it is not well known, the official language of India is, drumroll, English. They have the second largest English-speaking population in the world. And if you count people who speak English as a second language, they're number one in the world. Why is that? British India Company. And if you know anything about the railroad system there, the university system, their political structures, all of that came from the British India Company. What about the Dutch East India Company? Established in 1602, by the year 1634, they had achieved a company value of 8.2 trillion, with a T, in today's dollars. making it the most expensive company to have ever existed. Many times more valuable than Google or Netflix or some of these companies that we have today. And they had massive impacts all over Southeast Asia. These impacts were probably not what was in the minds of investors when they're buying these stocks and bonds. They were just thinking about investing, but there's a world change impact because of the movement of capital. So the world of investing is off and running in the late 1600s, and we should not be surprised that abuse soon followed. And one of the people that would speak about this is actually Daniel Defoe, who wrote Robinson Crusoe. He wrote essays on many contemporary subjects, including investing. Here's one on investing. He says, investing has raised the fancies of credulous people to such a height that merely on the shadow of expectation, hey, they've formed companies, chose committees, appointed officers, shares, books, raised great stocks, and cried up an empty notion to that degree that people have been betrayed to part with their money for shares in a new nothing. And when the investors have carried on the jest, until they've sold all their own interest, they leave the cloud to vanish of itself, and the poor purchasers to quarrel with one another, to go to law about settlements, transferrings, some bone or other thrown among them by the subtlety of the author, to lay blame of the miscarriage upon themselves. Thus the shares at first began to fall by degrees, and happy is he who sells in time, till like brass money, it will go at last for nothing at all. What he's saying is that people are really frothy about this new thing of investing. Somebody gets an idea, and all of a sudden it's a rush to erect a company and issue stocks and bonds without a lot of substance. So you've got these kind of facade companies. The original investors will then cash out, make a profit, vanish into the ether, and leave everyone else fighting over table scraps. And so investing got really risky at this time. But also there was a lot of corporate malfeasance where there were these companies were erected just for the purpose of profit, and then really wreaking a lot of harm in people's lives. And so what was needed at this time was somebody to come along and bring an ethical vision to investing. And that person was John Wesley. John Wesley was an English minister in the 17th century. You may know him because he established the Methodist movement within Christianity. He also, the Wesleyan Church is named after John Wesley. This is his most famous quote: "Do all the good you can, by all the means you can, in all the ways you can, in all the places you can, at all the times you can, to all the people you can, as long as you ever can." Beautiful quote. He's someone that I greatly admire. And he preached a sermon, very famous sermon, in the year 1759 entitled "The Use of Money." And in it, he talks about principles of investment for his audience, the church. And I say it's a very famous sermon because this sermon actually launched what we know today as faith-based investing or biblically responsible investing. It is also the starting point of socially responsible investing and values-based investing in general. Secular people, as well as those within the church, cite this sermon. So I want to give you a longer quote. And I should warn you, this is fiery preacher language from the 17th century. We're not used to hearing language quite this strong, but I want you to get a sense for his argument. "We are thirdly to gain all we can without hurting our neighbor. But this we cannot do if we love our neighbor as ourselves. We cannot, if we love everyone as ourselves, hurt anyone in his substance. Hereby all pawnbroking is excluded. We are not allowed to, quote, do evil that good may come." The reason that's in quotes is he's actually challenging this argument that people had at that time. Say, hey, well, what if we make money in some shady company, but then we give the profits away to charity? He's like, no, the ends don't justify the means. "Neither may we gain by hurting our neighbor in his body. Therefore, we may not sell anything which tends to impair health. Such is eminently all that liquid fire, commonly called drams or spirituous liquors. And what is the seller's gain? Is it not the blood of these men? A curse is in the midst of them. The curse of God cleaves to the stones, the timber, the furniture of them. The curse of God is in their gardens, their walks, their groves, a fire that burns to the nethermost hell. Blood is there. The foundation, the floor, the walls, the roof are stained with blood." I warned you. There's one more part to this quote. "This is dear bought gain. and so is whatever is procured by hurting our neighbor in his soul, by ministering, suppose, either directly or indirectly to his unchastity or intemperance, which certainly none can do, who has any fear of God or any real desire of pleasing him. It nearly concerns all those to consider this, who have anything to do with taverns, victualling houses, opera houses, playhouses, or any other places of public fashionable diversion. And then he lays out a principle. If these profits profit the souls of men, you are clear. Your employment is good, your gain is innocent. But if they are either sinful in themselves or natural inlets to sin of various kinds, then it is to be feared. You have a sad account to make. Oh, beware, lest God say in that day, these have perished in their iniquity, but their blood do I require at thy hands. Wow, right? This is strong. We don't usually hear this kind of language from a pastor or a preacher today. But what's he saying? I hope you got a sense for what he's arguing here. He's saying, when we invest, it's not just about the gain that we receive. He's saying that profit is coming from some activity that's either a help to our neighbor or a harm. And that we need to make sure that we seek to gain all we can. He's not against making money. Gain all we can without harming our neighbor. So what is the story on the other side of those dollars? And by framing it as an impact on our neighbor, he's actually making a world change argument here. And as I said, this went on to found faith-based investing and socially responsible investing to this day. Okay, so if we jump to the modern day, think about some big companies, Google, Facebook, Twitter, Netflix. Consider the power that these companies have had in changing the world. Think about the number of hours that are spent on YouTube or Netflix. YouTube reports that every single day, there are over 1 billion hours of video streamed globally. That's 114,000 years of video watched every single day. This is definitely shaping us. Consider the way that many of our opinions and our news now is happening over social media. I mean, all throughout this election, I was just, paying so much attention to Twitter, listening to what President Trump was saying, listening to what other news outlets were saying, listening to all my friends. We now go to the social media platforms because of influencers to listen to what they have to say about things. Dramatic impacts on the way that we live today. And guess what? All of these companies were funded by investors. First in venture capital, then in initial public offerings, pushed higher in secondary markets. Impacts we don't often think about. All right, let me give you one last historical example here. And this one is an amazing positive example. And for those of you that are Christians on this call, this is something I think that you can be really proud of. This is our history. So if you go back to the year 1971, Christians were very concerned about apartheid. For those of you that may be fuzzy on this history, apartheid is a word from a South African language that means separation. So apartheid can literally be translated as aparthood, or to keep separate. And it described a racial segregation in South Africa during that time. So the Black population was kept separate from the white population, and it wasn't separate but equal. The Black population was actually treated in an inferior manner. So Christians had heard about this here in the US, and they were concerned. The government wasn't really responding either. So I mentioned that politics is sometimes impotent. So the South African government had already ignored multiple United Nations sanctions and embargoes. They basically, thumbed their nose at the United Nations and said, we don't care. So what do, right? You're a Christian, you care about this issue, politics isn't working. Well, a group of Christians decided to take up the power of investing to change the world. So this was actually the Episcopal Church. And what they did is they realized that they had ownership through their stocks in the company General Motors, the automotive company. And General Motors had operations in South Africa. And so what they did is they said, what if we, since we're owners of the company, what if we filed a shareholder resolution to GM and asked them to change their ways? So they did that. And this is the first example of modern shareholder advocacy. So they enlisted the help of this person to do this. This is Leon Sullivan. You can see he's a Black man. He was a Baptist minister, and an anti-apartheid activist. So he grew up in Philadelphia in a segregated US under Jim Crow and was discriminated against as a young Black boy. And he carried that burden with him in life. And so when he heard about the plight of the Black population in South Africa, he became very concerned. So he works with these Episcopals, and they come up with what they call the Sullivan Principles, a set of specific proposals to General Motors that General Motors could adopt and satisfy the concerns here. So it was things like equal pay for equal work, same working conditions for Blacks and whites, integrating the bathrooms and water fountains. Those were kept separate at the time, things like that. And General Motors says, we'll do it. In fact, this is amazing. They bring Leon Sullivan, this Baptist minister, onto the board of General Motors to oversee the whole thing. Then guess what happens? Well, two other automotive companies, Ford and Goodyear, who had operations in South Africa, they said, we'll do it too. And one by one by one, like dominoes, the culture begins to change. And history remembers that one of the key instruments in the fall of apartheid, if not the key instrument, was actually this investor pressure from ordinary Christians. And by the way, they had a 0.004% stake in General Motors. So I think it's pretty amazing and exciting idea we're talking about here. So how do we do it? How do we harness this power in our own investments today? Well, to succeed, a few things are required. Number one, we got to be intentional. This does not happen by accident. Number two, we got to work together. No one of us with our individual IRA or 401k is going to amount to much. But if we work together, such as through a financial advisor, through companies like my own, we gain tremendous force. And finally, we need investments. We need tools to do this. And my company does this. There are others that Michael knows about. So what do we mean by this intentionality here? So intentionality can be thought of in kind of a few ways. The first is avoid. So this is what John Wesley talked about. Avoiding investing in companies that have problems, that represent harm of neighbor or dishonor of God. The next would be to embrace positively investing in companies that we feel like are adding value to the world. I'm going to talk more about that. And engage. That's what the Episcopals did with General Motors in apartheid. So with the last part of my talk, I want to give you 3 contemporary examples from our own investments. Many of you that invest with us through Michael are actually probably participating in these themes, so you can use this as a chance to learn about what you're involved in here. So the first one I want to talk about is clean energy. So here are some recent headlines about India. India's pollution today is as deadly as the black smog that covered Britain during the Industrial Revolution. New Delhi's gas chamber, New Delhi is a city in India, New Delhi's gas chamber smog is so bad that United Airlines has stopped flying there. Look at this last one. Breathing in Delhi air is equivalent to smoking 44 cigarettes a day. You know, I just want to say, whenever you heard clean energy, your mind might have gone to, oh boy, is he going to talk to me about climate change or those kinds of things? I'm not. I'm going to show you the human side of pollution in places in the world that we don't often think about. And so we're going to look at some of these places like India. This is a picture from New Delhi. This is a typical day. All the images I'll show you are smog, not fog. This is a famous arch in New Delhi called the India Gate. This is in Beijing, another place in the world where it is particularly choking. Same image, left and right. On the left, a heavy rain has just come through and washed away temporarily. The smog on the right is what it looks like on a regular day. This is the Forbidden City in Beijing. This is also Beijing. Here in the foreground, you can see people wearing masks. We're of course used to this today, but this was taken long before coronavirus. There's no virus in the air here. People in places like Beijing, they wear masks even when there's no virus. This is a regular everyday habit because they're just trying to filter the air and breathe cleaner air. This is another picture from Beijing. So pollution in places like this actually account for 16% of all premature deaths worldwide. You can see that the estimate is 9 million. You can see that it exceeds tobacco smoking, which is why they were able to make that comparison to the number of cigarettes. It obviously affects your lung health. And you can see the other things here. It exceeds all forms of violence that exist in the world, et cetera. Same data here, but what you can see are the type of pollution that's being looked at. Air is in blue, broken out by the wealth of countries. So low income, lower middle income, upper middle income, high income. So here we are in the US. You can see that our air quality, the number of deaths due to air quality in the US, is the lowest in the world. We don't deal with this problem, but you can see that places like India and China certainly do. And it's because of the images that I showed you. There's just so many fumes and particles that people breathe in. It affects their health, and it causes a lot of morbidity. But there's a really great solution to this, and it's pretty amazing. We can actually take the power of God's natural resources, convert them to energy to power civilization without many of these pollutants. So here's a quote that I'm going to ask you who said this. I'd put my money on the sun and solar energy. What a source of power. I hope we don't have to wait until oil and coal run out before we tackle that. I wish I had more years left. I'm going to give you some choices as to who said this. Who do you think? Elon Musk, the founder of Tesla, Sheikh Ahmed Zaki Yamani, a Saudi oil minister, Al Gore, the former vice president, Thomas Edison, the inventor, or Jim Robo, the CEO of NextEra Energy. Great. Appreciate you guys participating here. These are all energy folks that I'm showing you on the screen here. Let's see what you guess. All right, last call. All right, I'll share the results. Good job. 70% of you got it right. Thomas Edison. All other guesses, as I said, were good ones because these are all relevant. So Thomas Edison, check this out. In 1931, he dreamed of what we were able to do today. And so this is something I think we should be really excited about. And coronavirus actually gave us a glimpse of what world change would look like. On the left this is the India Gate I showed you in New Delhi. On the left is an image taken in November 2019. On the right is an image taken in March 2020 during the economic slowdown in coronavirus. The air immediately cleared up. I would much rather live in the world that exists on the right than on the left. All right, let me give you another one here. This one is really exciting. Water technology. More than 2,000 children die each day from water-related illness. Something we don't think about. What does it mean when we say that someone has access to drinking water? This is a global definition. It means that every member of your house is able to get 20 liters of clean water by going a distance of less than 1 kilometer radius. Now, many of us don't think in terms of liters, we think in terms of gallons. So how much is 20 liters? Well, the average American uses 65 liters in one shower. Here we're talking about 20 liters, and not just for showering, but you can see all domestic purposes, including drinking, cooking, as well as personal hygiene. Let me give you some stats on this water problem. About 1 million people die each year from diarrhea due to water-related illness. 80% are children under the age of 5. That's where the stats on the children came from. Dirty water is the second largest killer of children in the world, behind pneumonia. By 2025, how many people will not have access, given the definition we discussed? Approaching 1 billion. Huge number of people. 133 million people have what are called high-intensity worm infections in their gut. I'm going to talk about this. Half the schools of the world do not have access to clean water. Here in the US, we got water fountains every few hundred yards in our schools. It's not that way around the rest of the world. An investment, interestingly, in clean water has a big yield to society. So $1 invested in clean water is estimated to generate almost $26 in returns. If you figure that people are not missing work, they're not on the toilet, they're not in the hospital, there's less burden on the healthcare system. If you add up all of those returns to society, it makes a big difference. This is our portfolio manager at my company, Eventide. This is Finney. These are 3 of his boys. He has 8 children. These photos are taken in Uganda, right on the border of Rwanda. He goes there every year for church reasons. While he's there, he conducts a deworming clinic. Prior to becoming an investor, he was a medical doctor in the Boston area. And this is a photo showing people that are lined up for this deworming clinic. And these lines go on all day for the whole time that he does it. There's no way he can see everybody. Everybody in the region has basically this critter living in their gut. This is Bilharzia. This is that high intensity worm infection living in your gut that I mentioned. 133 million people have this, and you get it from drinking contaminated water. So it lays eggs in your blood. You excrete it through your urine and feces. It goes back into the water system, contaminates the water. The whole problem just perpetuates. And it's very treatable, fortunately, but not in any lasting way unless you're giving people clean water. In most of the world, water is considered women's work. These are some women in Somalia who are getting water for their family from a ditch. This is a woman in Mumbai or Bombay who's getting her family's water from train tracks. The reason that it's important that this is considered women's work is imagine if you have a family, you have a son and a daughter, family needs water, but it's a school day. Guess which one of those children, the boy or the girl, is going to miss school that day? It's going to be the girl, because water is considered women's work. This is one of the reasons why women fall behind in their educational progress in the developing world. It's because they just have to deal with this pressing reality. Parts of the world are reaching crisis levels. Look at this well in Gujarat, India. And so frequent fights break out. Here's two women fighting in Pune over water. Here's a quote. We face acute shortages of water, but water is available only 2 to 3 hours a day. Frequent fights, need to walk 20 to 30 minutes to fetch water. It is so humiliating. The world has a lot of water. It's an access problem. As we know, most of the world's water, about 97%, is in the ocean, so it's salt water. That leaves a little sliver of fresh water. If we zoom into this and blow it up, you can see most of that's in glaciers and ice caps. Most of all the rest is underground, access problem. That leaves a little sliver of surface water. If you zoom in on that and blow it up, most of that is in ice and snow. And finally, you get to potable surface water sources like rivers and lakes. But rivers and lakes are usually not where the people are in the dense urban areas. And then, of course, cities are culprits for contaminating water. So the world's got a lot of water. It's an access problem. But fortunately, this is an easy one to fix. Using very basic water filtration technology at a commercial scale like this, which we've known about for decades, experts in the world of water will tell you that we could fix the entire globe's access problem within 1 year. 1 year. Amazing. If we just had investors with the heart and capital to see it accomplished. So at my company, we're very interested in this theme. And we sought for a way to participate in helping the world, the developing world, gain access to water in a for-profit, publicly traded company. We identified a company that's one of the leaders in the world in the area of water technology, and they're the #1 company for the developing world. 25% of their business comes from there. And it's by design. This is from their website. Pretty amazing to see from a publicly traded company. They have a goal by the year 2025 to provide clean water to at least 20 million people living at the very bottom of the global economic pyramid, the poorest of the poor. Isn't that amazing? This is built into their business. This is matched by substantial volunteering and straight donations, making this, I think, just a really exciting company. And if our children wanted to go work here, wow, we'd send them off with a blessing. All right, last example. We're going to talk about an unmet need in healthcare in the area of the central nervous system. So what is the disease schizophrenia? I'm going to ask you what you know about this by our last poll here. What do you know about this disease? I'll give you a chance to read over this. I'll give you 4 choices.
And Jason, as they're answering the poll, there is a question and answer function at the bottom. I forgot to mention earlier. So if you have any questions so far for Jason, we will have a Q&A session at the end. So go ahead and use that button to answer questions. Thanks, Jason.
Great. Yeah, I appreciate you mentioning that. Yeah, looking forward to hearing if you have any questions at the end. Okay, schizophrenia. What do we know about this disease? All right, I'm going to go ahead, say last call. All right, let's see how we did. Pretty split here. The majority answer was a delusional disorder known for exaggerated fears and unlikely events. Let's take a look at what it is. I'll let you know here in just a moment. So the disease, yeah, there's a lot of confusion around it. One of the ones that was incorrect on that list was multiple personalities, but this is very, very commonly thought to be the case. You may have heard the expression, oh, don't be schizophrenic, Jason. Don't be one person 1 minute and a different person the next. What we're saying there is don't be different people. Don't have multiple personalities. So there's that misunderstanding that's pretty common there. It's actually known by a set of symptoms. Let me show you those. So that was the correct answer. And there's positive symptoms. This doesn't mean good. It just means expressed. And negative symptoms, things that should be there that are repressed. The hallmark positive symptoms are delusions and hallucinations. People will see things, they will hear things. It's common for them to, let's say, hear the wall talking to them, telling them often to do very dark things like hurt themselves or to hurt others. It's characterized by disorganized speech. It's really hard to understand someone who has schizophrenia when they're trying to talk. On the negative side, they'll have a flat affect. What that means is they lack the wide emotional range that you and I have. They won't communicate as much. They'll have reduced speech, and then they lack initiative. They just cannot get motivated. Anyone come to mind for you when I was going over those symptoms? Where have we encountered people in our comings and goings in life that suffer from schizophrenia? If your mind went to the homeless, you would be correct. Where my company is based in Boston, if I were to walk the streets of Boston, I would encounter many people that I would be tempted to say are crazy. What is that quote, crazy? The formal diagnosis is often schizophrenia. Schizophrenia is one of the top drivers for why people become homeless in the first place. It affects a lot more people than we think, about 3 million Americans. It's about 1% of the population. The medicines we have for it are ancient, barely work, and have horrible side effects. The last approved treatment in schizophrenia was the year 1952. 52. Ancient medicine. Barely works, has horrible side effects, so people don't stay on it. So basically, there's no recourse for this disease. World Health Organization ranks it as the third most debilitating disease in the world. If you have schizophrenia, it dominates your life. It is like being imprisoned to that disease. Completely takes over. So this is a huge problem, right? Be amazing if we could do something here. We've been looking at this space for a long time. We do a lot of healthcare investing at my company, somewhat of a specialty for us. And there was a company that we had invested in the past, a private company, who came to us and they said, we think we've got a way to take on schizophrenia. And so we were very interested, but also very skeptical. As I mentioned, the disease hasn't seen a breakthrough since the year 1952, but we were very interested. So he said, yeah, show us what you got. So they laid out their case. They brought us the medical literature and they said, if we do this with this mechanism of action, we think it'll have this effect. They made their pitch and they said, we want you to just digest this, see what you think. So we took their information, put it through our gauntlet of tests, scrutinized it and said, actually, this has real potential. So we actually invested in the company when it was still private. We can do a little bit of that in our mutual funds. And what we were waiting on was the results from a clinical trial. So what they did was they took a group of patients with schizophrenia, split them in half. Half the group, they gave a placebo, which is nothing. The other half, they gave the active drug. Admit them to the hospital for 5 weeks and monitor their symptoms. And here are the results. You can see baseline is day 0 up to 5 weeks. That's what's going on the x-axis. On the y-axis, it looks complicated, but it's actually really simple. You see this PANSS. It stands for positive and negative symptom score. I showed you what the positive and negative symptoms were. So of course, what you want to see is the active drug reduce the number of symptoms that someone has over that 5-week stay. The black dotted line shows you what happened with the placebo. And you might be thinking, well, why did that go down? This was actually expected because it's such a debilitating disease that just being in a hospital with regular care and meals, you get better a little bit. So that was expected. But this is what happened with the active drug in the blue. They got more than a 15-point reduction in this PANSS score, which clinicians will tell you is a complete game changer. Changes the life of someone with schizophrenia. This has never been really seen before. And so this was amazing, but we also had the question of what are the side effects? Because I told you the side effects were terrible on the old medicine. And the way that you can kind of get at this is by asking how many people are leaving the study over the 5-week period. And if you see a higher percentage leaving on the active drug than the placebo, you must think, well, the side effects for this must be pretty bad. 20% of the patients discontinued on the drug, 21% on the placebo. So no difference there. So basically you have something that works according to the data and something that appears to have very low side effects. We're awaiting a phase 3 clinical trial, but based on these results, we are extremely optimistic. And this would represent a massive breakthrough in the world of schizophrenia and homelessness. At my company, we call this philosophy investing that makes the world rejoice, which is poetic, I will admit, but hopefully you can see there's real substance to this as well. Let me leave you with this as a final quote. This is from the sociologist I opened up with. Most of us are inclined to what has been called the great man or great person view of history, that the history of the world is but the biography of great men. The only problem with this perspective is that it's mostly wrong. Against this great man view of history and culture, I would argue, along with many others, that the key actor in history is not the individual genius, but rather the network. And one of the reasons why I'm so excited to be sharing this with you today is we are just very keen on helping people to gain a bigger vision for how they use their money, and to build this coalition of investors who want to save up for their family's future, which is totally a good thing, but to do so in ways that are also a blessing to our neighbor and to the wider world. And so will you join us in this effort? And with that, I'm going to welcome Michael back on, and we can take any questions that you might have.
Yeah, thank you, Jason, for your time. So please, for those that have any questions, please put them in these Q&A section on your Zoom app. And this is my contact information, as we're waiting for any questions. Feel free to reach out. My phone number is 813-431-2640 for those who are on the call. I'd love to schedule some time. We offer free reviews of portfolios. For instance, the largest mutual fund, which is the Vanguard S&P 500, has well over $400 million that are not in, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jason, that are in what we would consider non-companies that don't support the alignment. And we do have a question that's coming in. If you align your investing and values, do you have to sacrifice return?
Yeah, this is probably the most common question we get after a presentation like this. And it's not to throw cold water on the idea. It's just a lot of the things I was sharing, you might expect that I'm giving like a missionary update or something. They just seem like really exciting philanthropy kinds of stories. But no, these are all investments that were chosen on the basis of their potential to make an attractive return, and on the basis of their potential to impact the world in positive ways. Mm-hmm. With a different presentation, I could have just focused on the financial argument for each of those 3 examples. So like with the schizophrenia drug, for example, the fact that there's 3 million people that need it, it's a big addressable market. And if they experience this breakthrough with that drug, they're going to be able to really sell that in the marketplace, and it should lead to an attractive return. And so, no, I don't believe you have to sacrifice returns. In fact, all of our funds that we offer at my company, just as one example, that are old enough to have a track record, have achieved industry rankings that are very competitive with our peers. They're all 4- and 5-star funds according to Morningstar. So yeah, returns should not be sacrificed, in my opinion, or you shouldn't have to sacrifice returns to pursue your values.
Thanks, Jason. And we did have one more. It says, if you're interested in seeing if values-based investing is right for us, what are the next steps? So, we do, at the registration process, we do have emails. I'm connected with most of you already, either through LinkedIn or Facebook. I will be sending out a link. Again, one of the things I was mentioning.
Michael, you may be able to just you see the type answer there on that question. You may be able to drop a link right there if that's easier.
Okay, yeah, I'll do that. So we do offer, thanks, Jason. We do offer free analysis, so we can take a look at your portfolio. So if you want to send us statements, and we can actually show you how your statements, through a process of how they're invested. And we'll show you, for instance, that, some companies that are in favor of pornography, abortion. I mean, there's multiple areas that, that we can look at. And then again, see if it fits. Something like Eventide is definitely on our platform, is what we use. So I'm going to be putting a link to our calendar for those that want to do a follow-up. And that's just for a free web conference. Are there any other questions anyone may have? Jason, any last words of wisdom for the group?
No, I hope that what you've taken away from this is just the other side of your dollars. So you're investing, of course, to earn an attractive rate of return. That's, as I said, a good thing. But I hope that I've allowed you to consider what's happening on the other side of the account statement, what's happening on the other side of the charts, and to think about how you can use your money strategically, not only to save up for your future, but also to just be a blessing to humanity through the way that you live your life. So take that as a word of encouragement and a challenge.
Yeah, thank you for your time today, Jason. I do want to thank everyone who took time out of their busy schedules. Again, we will be sending up follow-up emails. This was my first webinar on biblical responsible investing, so I'd love to hear your feedback, and also just some feedback on the time of day. I know for those that are on here, if this time works for you, because we will continue bringing Eventide back on a regular basis, because they have so much to offer. Had someone ask, what was my MOS in the military? Happy Veterans Day. Yeah, thank you. For those that don't know, I'm a West Point graduate. I've been in the financial services industry for 18 years. I was a U.S. Army MP officer. I served 5 years overseas. Most of the time I was in Germany, and also did a small peacekeeping operation in Bosnia. I hung up my Army hat, but I am a soldier for Christ. So that's where I spend my time right now. So thank you for that question. And yeah, it was an honor to be able to serve. So for those veterans who are on the call, happy Veterans Day as well. So thank you for your time today. God bless you all, and have a blessed rest of your day. And thanks again, Jason, for your time, and hope you have a blessed day as well.
Thank you.